Welcome to my channel. Welcome to that channel.
By 3 o'clock on Saturday afternoon, Constable Ewan McRae had decided that the village fete had been a mistake. Not his mistake, naturally. The village committee had made the mistake. Ewan had merely been unfortunate enough to be the only police officer within 20 miles who could be persuaded to attend. He stood beside the tea tent with a paper cup in one hand and watched the rain arrive sideways across the village green. It was the sort of rain that did not fall so much as a tack. It rattled against the canvas awnings, flattened the bunting, soaked the cardboard signs advertising homemade jam, and sent a dozen children shrieking toward the church hall. Ewan took a slow sip of coffee. Cold, he sighed. Terrible, isn't it? The voice belonged to Mrs. Agnes Bell, who had been running the tea tent for 37 years and considered weather personally insulting. Ewan looked at the grey sky. Aye. The forecast said sunshine. Aye. It hasn't been sunny. No. Mrs. Bell narrowed her eyes. Do you ever say anything useful? Ewan considered this. Not on Saturdays. She gave him a disgusted look and returned to arranging slices of fruitcake that were rapidly absorbing moisture from the atmosphere. Ewan smiled faintly. He liked Mrs. Bell. She was one of those people who believed policemen should either be arresting someone or carrying something heavy. Standing around drinking coffee was, in her opinion, a misuse of public funds. The village of Glenmara was small enough that everybody knew everybody else's business. Unfortunately, Ewan knew most of it twice. He knew who was secretly borrowing money from whom. He knew which married man bought flowers on Wednesdays and claimed they were for his mother. He knew that the minister had once fallen asleep during his own sermon. He knew that the butcher's wife hated the baker. He knew that the baker's wife hated everyone. And he knew that the new Englishman staying at the Glenmara Arms had managed to irritate nearly the entire village in less than 48 hours. His name was Charles Weatherby. He was 58, wealthy, recently divorced, and possessed of the particular confidence of a man who had spent most of his life being obeyed. He had bought an old estate house 3 miles outside the village. On arriving, he had announced that Glenmara was charming but economically stagnant. Nobody had asked what he meant. He had also complained about the church bells, then the sheep, then the lack of parking, then the quality of the local whiskey. The last offense had nearly started a war. Ewan had met him the previous evening. Weatherby had looked him up and down. You're the local policeman? Aye. You seem remarkably young. People say that. How many officers cover this district? 1. Weatherby had frowned. 1. Aye. That seems inadequate. Ewan had taken a sip of tea. Usually it is. Weatherby had not laughed. Ewan had. That was probably why Weatherby disliked him. Now, across the village green, Ewan watched the Englishman standing beneath the marquee belonging to the Historical Society. Weatherby was wearing a cream linen jacket entirely unsuitable for Scottish weather. His shoes were polished. His hair was immaculate. He looked as though he had arrived expecting a garden party and had accidentally wandered into a fishing village. Beside him stood the mayor, Mr. Douglas Kerr, who had spent most of the afternoon attempting to charm him. Nobody knew why. Money, Ewan thought. Money made otherwise sensible people develop strange hobbies. A gust of wind lifted one corner of the marquee. Weatherby grabbed it. The mayor grabbed it too. The two men wrestled briefly with the canvas. Then Weatherby shouted something Ewan couldn't hear. The mayor shouted back. Ewan took another sip of coffee. Mrs. Bell appeared beside him. What are they arguing about? Probably the weather. They've been arguing for 10 minutes. Then it must be serious. Mrs. Bell stared at him. You really don't care, do you? Ewan looked toward the road. No, that was not entirely true. He cared about everything. He simply preferred people to believe he didn't. It was an old habit. People talked freely around someone they thought was harmless. They became careful around someone they thought was clever. And Ewan had discovered years ago that being underestimated was much more comfortable. The rain intensified. The fete was officially abandoned at 3:15. The announcement was met with cheers. The children disappeared. The cake stall closed. The raffle tickets were swept into a cardboard box. Someone rescued 6 folding chairs from the wind, and the village green slowly emptied. Ewan remained where he was. He had nowhere urgent to go. His cottage was warm. His kettle worked. There was half a loaf of bread on the counter. And, most importantly, nobody had yet asked him to fill out paperwork. He was considering returning home when he noticed something. The marquee belonging to the Historical Society was still standing, and Charles Weatherby was no longer underneath it. Ewan frowned. The mayor was gone too. He looked around. A few villagers were still collecting things. Mrs. Bell was arguing with the baker. The minister was carrying a box of books. Nobody appeared concerned. Ewan started walking, slowly. He crossed the wet grass and reached the marquee. Inside, several tables had been overturned by the wind. Old photographs lay scattered across the floor. There was nobody there. Mr. Weatherby? No answer. Ewan looked toward the rear flap of the marquee. It was open. Beyond it stood a narrow path leading toward the old stone wall behind the church. He followed it. The rain had softened the ground. His boots sank into the mud. Then he saw the shoe, brown leather. Expensive. Half hidden beneath the long grass. Ewan stopped. He looked at it for several seconds. Then he sighed. He stepped closer. Charles Weatherby was lying on his back beside the stone wall. His cream jacket was soaked dark with rain. One arm rested awkwardly across his chest. His face was turned toward the sky. There was no blood, no obvious wound. For one absurd moment, Ewan wondered whether the man had simply fallen asleep. Then he noticed the expression. Weatherby looked surprised. Not frightened, not angry. Surprised. As if the last thing he had seen had been something he couldn't possibly have expected. Ewan crouched. He did not touch the body. Instead, he looked around. The rain was already washing away footprints, but not all of them. There was one set leading from the marquee. Another set came from the direction of the church. And a third. Ewan narrowed his eyes. A third set stopped beside the wall. There were no footprints leading away. He stared at them. Then he looked at Weatherby's shoes. Dry, almost completely dry. Ewan slowly stood. That was interesting. Very interesting. Behind him came the sound of hurried footsteps. Ewan. It was Mrs. Bell. She stopped when she saw his face. What is it? Ewan looked at her. Get everyone back to the hall. Why? Because Mr. Weatherby won't be needing his tea. Mrs. Bell stared past him. Her mouth opened, then closed. Oh. Ewan looked once more at the dead man. The village fete had been cancelled because of the rain. But Ewan suddenly suspected that the rain had not ruined the afternoon. It had hidden something. And somewhere in Glenmara, someone was probably very pleased about that. Chapter 2. The village begins to talk. By 4 o'clock, everyone in Glenmara knew that Charles Weatherby was dead. By 4:30, everyone had a theory. By 5, there were 17 theories. Ewan MacRae suspected that by supper, there would be at least 30, most of them involving the minister, the mayor, and a mysterious woman nobody had actually seen. He stood in the doorway of the church hall, dripping rainwater onto the stone floor, and watched the villagers pretend not to watch him. They were not very good at pretending. The hall smelled of wet coats, instant coffee, and fear. Mrs. Bell had taken charge of the tea urn. She always took charge of things when nervous. At the far end of the room, Reverend Colin Fraser was speaking quietly to the mayor, Douglas Kerr. The mayor looked pale. Ewan noticed that immediately. Douglas Kerr was a large, cheerful man who normally became red whenever he was excited. At present, he was grey. That suggested either shock or guilt. Ewan did not decide which. He had learned never to make decisions too early. A policeman who decided on a murderer before asking questions was merely a man in uniform with an imagination. Who found him? The question came from Mrs. Bell. You did not. I mean, who found the body? I did. And what were you doing there? Walking. In the rain? Aye. For pleasure? Ewan looked at her. Not exactly. A few people laughed nervously. Mrs. Bell did not. Was he murdered? I don't know. He looked dead. That is usually a clue. Someone snorted. The tension loosened for half a second. Then the door opened. A uniformed constable from the neighboring district entered, followed by 2 officers from the regional headquarters. Ewan recognized Sergeant McBride. McBride looked at him. You've found a body. Aye. Who is it? Charles Weatherby. McBride swore softly. You knew him? Everybody knew him. Did you like him? Ewan considered the question. No. McBride raised an eyebrow. That's honest. He was rude. That isn't a crime. Not yet. McBride almost smiled. Then he remembered where they were. Where's the body? Behind the church. Anyone touched him? No. Moved anything? No. Good. Ewan nodded. McBride glanced toward the crowd. Keep everyone here. Ewan looked at him. For how long? Until we finish taking statements. Ewan sighed. That meant paperwork. He disliked paperwork almost as much as he disliked being indoors. He turned toward the villagers. Right. Nobody leaves until Sergeant McBride says you can. There was an immediate chorus of complaints. I need to feed the dog. My shop is open. My husband doesn't know where I am. He'll survive. What if he doesn't? Then I'll have another body to investigate. That silenced them. Ewan moved through the room. He began with the obvious questions. Who had seen Weatherby? Who had spoken to him? Who had left the Fête early? Nobody had seen anything, which meant, Ewan thought, that somebody had seen everything. He stopped beside Douglas Kerr. When did you last speak to Mr. Weatherby? The mayor rubbed his hands together. About 2:30. What about? The estate. What about it? He wanted to discuss the old mill. Ewan waited. Kerr looked uncomfortable. What did he want? To buy it. From whom? The council. Could he? Not without a vote. Did he have the votes? Kerr looked away. Not all of them. Did you? The mayor frowned. Did I what? Have the votes? I don't understand. You're doing very well. Kerr's face reddened. Ewan moved on. He found the minister near the window. Reverend. Constable. You spoke to Weatherby today? Yes. When? Shortly after 2. About. The minister hesitated. Nothing important. Ewan glanced at him. People rarely murder each other over nothing important. I didn't say anything about murder. No. Silence. Rain tapped against the windows. Ewan noticed a small dark stain on the minister's cuff. What happened there? The minister looked down. Jam. Strawberry. Yes. From the Fête? Yes. Ewan nodded. He believed him. Mostly. Then he saw the minister's shoes. Mud. Fresh mud. Not much, but enough. Where did you walk after speaking to Weatherby? To the church. Directly? Yes. Which way? The minister pointed toward the rear door. Ewan followed the gesture. The same direction as the stone wall. Interesting. Before he could ask another question, a woman approached. She was in her early 40s, dark-haired, elegant despite the rain, and wearing a green coat that looked too expensive for Glenmara. Ewan recognized her, Margaret Weatherby, the dead man's sister. She had arrived that morning from Edinburgh. I need to see my brother, she said. You can't. I must identify him. Someone from headquarters will arrange that. She stared at Ewan. You're the local policeman? Aye. You don't look like much. Ewan nodded. That's useful. Her eyes narrowed. What do you mean? Nothing. She studied him for another moment. Then she whispered. Charles made enemies. Did he? Many. Who? She looked around the hall. Ask them. Ewan glanced at the villagers. Nobody met his eyes. That was the first thing all afternoon that made him genuinely interested. Margaret lowered her voice. My brother was planning to sell the estate. I know. He was going to leave Scotland. When? Monday. Ewan frowned. Why? She gave him a strange look. Because he had become frightened. Of what? Margaret hesitated. Then she leaned closer. He received a letter. What sort of letter? One that told him to leave Glenmara. Who sent it? I don't know. Where is it? Her expression changed. I thought Charles had it. Ewan looked toward the rain-streaked windows. A dead man, a missing letter, a disputed estate, and footprints that led to a body but apparently not away from it. He felt the familiar tightening in his mind. The village had begun to talk. Now he needed to listen carefully, because somewhere among all those voices was the person who had stopped Charles Weatherby from leaving Glenmara alive. Chapter 3. The letter nobody wanted. Ewan spent the next hour discovering that a village fete produced far more witnesses than useful information. Everyone had seen Charles Weatherby. Nobody had seen him doing anything suspicious. This was a common village phenomenon. People noticed everything and remembered nothing until the police arrived. Sergeant McBride established himself at a table in the church hall and began taking statements. Ewan left him to it. He had no desire to listen to Mrs. Bell explain, for the 4th time, how Weatherby had insulted her scones. Instead, Ewan went outside. The rain had eased. Mist hung over the hills, turning the mountains into vague shadows. The village looked peaceful again, which Ewan thought was suspicious in itself. He walked behind the church. The body had been covered with a sheet. 2 officers were examining the ground. Ewan crouched beside the wall. The footprints were still there. 3 sets. He studied them carefully. The first belonged to Weatherby. His polished shoes had made deep, narrow impressions. The second belonged to someone wearing ordinary walking boots. The third was stranger. The prints were shallow and uneven, as though the person had been walking backward. Ewan stared at them. Odd. McBride came up behind him. What? These. McBride crouched. You think they're the killers? I think they're feet. Very helpful. I try. McBride examined the impressions. Could have been made by someone leaving. Aye. Then why do you look unhappy? Because there aren't any prints beyond the wall. McBride looked toward the grass. The wall was waist high. Anyone could have climbed it. Maybe they climbed over. Then there should be prints on the other side. Maybe the rain washed them away. Ewan shook his head. Not there. The grass is sheltered. McBride stood. You're making this complicated. I haven't started yet. He walked toward the marquee. Inside, the Historical Society's tables were still scattered across the floor. Old photographs, books, and handwritten labels lay everywhere. Ewan remembered Weatherby's comment from the previous evening. He had wanted the old mill. Why? The mill had been abandoned for years. Nobody in Glenmara wanted it. Nobody except Weatherby. Ewan examined the table where Weatherby had been standing. There was a glass, untouched. Beside it lay a folded program from the Fête. Someone had circled the afternoon's final event in pencil. At 5 o'clock, there had been supposed to be an auction. The old mill was listed as the first item. Ewan frowned. He unfolded the program completely. Written across the margin were 4 words. Don't let him buy it. The handwriting was small. Careful. Ewan slipped the program into an evidence bag. He did not mention it to McBride immediately. That was partly because McBride was already shouting at a constable. It was also because Ewan wanted to know whether anyone else had noticed it. He returned to the hall. Margaret Weatherby was sitting alone. You said your brother received a letter. Yes. Did he show it to you? No. Did he say what it contained? He said someone wanted him gone. Did he seem frightened? She looked toward the window. Charles wasn't easily frightened. That wasn't my question. Margaret sighed. Yes, he was frightened. When? Last night. Where? At the hotel. Who was there? Charles, me, and the mayor. Ewan looked toward Douglas Kerr. The mayor was speaking with Sergeant McBride. Did your brother argue with the mayor? They argued about the mill. Anything else? Margaret hesitated. Charles accused him of lying. About? I don't know. Ewan believed she knew. He simply didn't know why she was protecting someone. Where was the letter? In Charles's room. Has anyone searched it? Not yet. Ewan nodded. I'll go. Margaret caught his sleeve. Constable. He looked down at her hand. Be careful. Of the room. Of everyone. That was better advice. The Glenmara Arms stood at the end of the village street, its windows glowing warmly against the grey afternoon. Ewan entered through the side door. The proprietor, Hamish Grant, was polishing glasses. Weatherby's room. Upstairs. Has anyone been inside? Only his sister. When? After lunch. Anyone else? Grant frowned. Not that I know. Ewan climbed the stairs. Room 6 was at the end of the corridor. The door stood open. Inside, everything looked expensive and orderly. A leather suitcase rested beside the bed. A raincoat hung over a chair. On the desk sat an open notebook. Ewan approached. Most of the pages contained figures. Then he saw a name. Douglas Kerr. Beneath it was another. Elaine Morrison. Ewan knew Ella. She owned the little bookshop beside the post office. He turned the page. Nothing. The next page had been torn out. He checked the waste paper basket. Empty. Too empty. Someone had cleaned it. Ewan opened the wardrobe. Nothing unusual. Then he noticed the suitcase. One side was packed. The other was empty. Weatherby had been preparing to leave. Perhaps Margaret was right. He looked beneath the bed. A small envelope lay against the wall. He pulled it out. There was no stamp, no address, only 3 words written on the front. You were warned. Ewan opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. He read it once, then again. The message was brief. You should have left before the fete. Ewan felt the room grow colder. Someone had known Weatherby would be at the village fete. Someone had expected him to die there. He folded the paper carefully. Then he noticed something else. The ink was still slightly wet. Ewan touched nothing. He simply stared. Whoever had written the warning had done so recently. Very recently. And if the letter had been placed here after Weatherby's death, then the killer had returned to the hotel. Perhaps they were still nearby. Ewan stepped into the corridor. At the far end, a door clicked shut. He moved quickly. For once, he did not look lazy at all. He reached the staircase as footsteps hurried downstairs, then stopped when the village bell began ringing. Chapter 4. The Man Who Rang the Bell. Ewan reached the bottom of the stairs, just as the church bell gave a final clang. The front door stood open. Cold air rushed through the hallway, carrying the smell of wet stone and rain. Ewan stepped outside. Nobody was running. That was disappointing. A man in a dark coat stood beside the church gate, staring upward at the bell tower. It was Douglas Kerr, the mayor. Ewan stopped. You rang the bell. Kerr turned. I heard someone in the church. Who? I don't know. You followed them? No. Why not? Kerr looked offended. I'm not a policeman. Lucky you. Ewan walked past him. The church door was unlocked. Inside, the building was empty. The minister appeared from the vestry. What is happening? Someone rang the bell. I heard it. Were you in here? Yes. Doing what? Praying. Ewan looked at him. For how long? The minister hesitated. Perhaps 20 minutes. Anyone visit you? No. Did you hear footsteps? Only yours. Ewan glanced toward the bell rope. It was swinging slightly. He touched it, still moving. Whoever had pulled it had done so moments earlier. He looked down. Mud marked the stone floor. 3 small footprints, then nothing. Ewan crouched. The prints were narrower than Weatherby's and smaller than Kerr's. They led toward the vestry. The minister noticed them. That wasn't there before. No. Ewan followed the marks. They stopped beside a wooden cupboard. He opened it. Inside were hymn books, candles, and a folded black umbrella. Nothing else. But on the floor behind the cupboard was a brass button. Ewan picked it up with a handkerchief. It was old-fashioned, darkened with age. The center bore a tiny engraved stag. Is this yours? He asked the minister. No. Kerr, no. Ewan placed it in his pocket. Outside, a car engine started. He hurried through the church door. A black sedan was pulling away from the hotel. Ewan ran into the road. The car accelerated. He caught only the rear number plate. He memorized it. Then he stopped. Running after cars was energetic. Ewan disliked energetic activities. He returned to the hotel. Hamish Grant was standing behind the reception desk. Who owns the black car? Grant looked nervous. I don't know. You saw it? Yes. Who was driving? I couldn't tell. Where did it come from? Grant hesitated. The rear parking area. That leads nowhere except the service lane. I know. Did anyone use that lane today? Grant looked down. Several people. Names. Weatherby. His sister. The mayor. Anyone else? Grant said nothing. Ewan waited. Grant finally whispered, Ella Morrison, the bookshop owner. Ewan remembered the notebook. Douglas Kerr. Ella Morrison. 2 names. 1 dead man. 1 missing page. He walked toward the bookshop. The shop was closed. A small brass bell sounded when he opened the door. Ella? No answer. Books filled every wall. The place smelled of dust, paper, and wood smoke. Ewan called again. Still nothing. He walked behind the counter. A cup of tea sat beside an open ledger. The tea was warm. He touched the cup. Very warm. Someone had been here recently. He looked around. A door behind the counter stood ajar. Ewan pushed it open. A narrow staircase led upstairs. He climbed. At the top was a small office. Ella Morrison stood beside the window. She turned when she heard him. You shouldn't be here. Probably not. Why did you come? Because your name was in Charles Weatherby's notebook. Her face changed. Only slightly. But Ewan noticed. What did he want from you? Nothing. That isn't what I asked. Ella folded her arms. Charles was buying properties. I know. He wanted my shop. Why? Because it adjoins the old mill land. Ewan understood. The mill wasn't simply an abandoned building. It sat on valuable ground. What was Douglas Kerr doing? Ella looked away. Ask him. I did. And he wasn't very helpful. A faint smile appeared. He never is when money is involved. Ewan stepped closer. Did you see Charles today? Yes. When? Before the rain. Where? Behind the marquee. What happened? He threatened me. With what? He said he would ruin me. Why? He said I had something that belonged to him. What? Ella looked toward the desk. A letter. Ewan's expression hardened. Where is it? She shook her head. I don't have it. Who does? I don't know. Ella. She looked at him. Charles wasn't killed because of the mill. Ewan said nothing. He was killed because of what he discovered about it. What did he discover? Ella's eyes filled with fear. Ask Douglas Kerr. Again. The same name. Ewan turned toward the stairs. Then he stopped. On the office floor was a wet footprint. Small. Narrow. Exactly like the ones inside the church. He looked at Ella. You've had a visitor. She went pale. I was alone. Ewan pointed at the footprint. No. For several seconds neither moved. Then something struck the downstairs window. They both flinched. Ewan rushed down. A stone lay on the floor. Wrapped around it was a scrap of paper. He unfolded it. 3 words were written across the page. Stop asking questions. Ewan stared at the message. Then he smiled. Not because it was funny, because whoever had written it had made one very serious mistake. They had assumed Ewan MacRae was interested in the truth. He wasn't. He was interested in staying in Glenmara, and somebody had just given him an excellent reason to solve the murder before headquarters decided to take over. He slipped the note into his pocket and looked through the window. Across the street, a figure stood beneath an umbrella. The face was hidden, but Ewan recognized the coat. It belonged to Reverend Fraser. The figure turned and disappeared into an alley. Ewan considered following. Then he noticed the rain beginning again. He decided against it. There were limits to police work. Some mysteries could wait until morning. This one, unfortunately, could not. Very much. Chapter 5. The Woman at the Mill. The rain returned before dusk, sweeping across Glenmara in silver sheets and rattling against the windows of the church hall. Sergeant McBride had given up trying to interview everyone. He now sat behind a folding table, surrounded by notebooks, half-finished cups of tea, and increasingly irritated villagers. Ewan stood beside the window. He had learned more by watching people than by questioning them. Douglas Kerr was nervous. Ella Morrison was frightened. Reverend Fraser was hiding something, and Margaret Weatherby was lying. He was almost certain of that last part. She had told him her brother was frightened, but she had not told him why. Ewan found her sitting alone near the fireplace. "Your brother had a letter," he said. Margaret looked up. "Yes. You said you thought he had it." "I did. I found another letter in his hotel room." Her face tightened. "What did it say?" "That he should have left before the fete." Margaret looked toward the door. "Then whoever wrote it knew he would be there." Charles was stubborn, so I gathered. He believed someone was trying to frighten him. Were they? Yes. Why? Margaret hesitated. Because of something he found. Ewan sat opposite her. "What?" She shook her head. "You don't understand. Try me. My brother had been investigating the old mill. So have several people. Not like Charles. What did he discover?" Margaret lowered her voice. "He found records." "What records?" "Old ownership documents." Ewan frowned. "The mill belonged to the council, officially, and unofficially?" Margaret looked at him. Money had been changing hands. That explained the mayor. Perhaps it explained Ella too. Ewan leaned back. "Who was taking it?" "I don't know." "You do." Margaret stared at the fire. "Charles said Douglas Kerr was involved." Ewan was not surprised. "Was he?" "I don't know." "Did Charles have proof?" "He said he did." "Where is it?" Margaret shook her head. "He never told me." Ewan stood. "Then someone else may know." Across the hall, Douglas Kerr suddenly left his chair. He approached Ewan. "Constable, I need to speak with you privately." They moved into the corridor. Kerr closed the door. "You're asking dangerous questions." "So I've been told." "You don't understand what you're dealing with." "Then explain it." Kerr rubbed his forehead. "Weatherby was going to destroy this village." "How?" "He wanted the mill." "That doesn't sound destructive." "He planned to turn it into luxury apartments." Ewan stared at him. "And? Do you know what that would do? Give people somewhere expensive to live. It would change everything." "Maybe." Kerr's voice hardened. "He would bring outsiders here. Investors, tourists, developers. Glenmara would become another place nobody could afford." Ewan considered that. It was the first sensible thing anyone had said about Weatherby. "Did you kill him?" Kerr recoiled. "No." "Did you threaten him?" "Yes." Ewan waited. Kerr looked ashamed. "I told him to leave." "When?" "Last night." "Did you write the letter?" "No." "Did you know about the letter?" "No." Ewan studied him. Kerr was frightened. But not of the police. He was frightened of someone else. Who else knew about Weatherby's plans? The council committee. Names. Kerr listed them. 3 names. Then he stopped. "Ella Morrison." "Why?" "She owned land beside the mill. She told me Weatherby wanted her shop." Kerr nodded. "And Reverend Fraser." Kerr looked uncomfortable. "What about him? Was he involved?" "No." The answer came too quickly. Ewan noticed. "Why are you protecting him?" "I am not. You are." Kerr sighed. "Fraser found something years ago." "What?" "Evidence that the mill accounts had been falsified." "By whom?" "I don't know. But he knew." "Yes." Ewan felt the pieces shifting. The mill, the money, the old documents, the threats, and now the minister. Where is the evidence? Kerr shook his head. Fraser destroyed it. Ewan didn't believe him. He returned to the hall. Reverend Fraser was standing by the coat rack. "Minister." "Yes." "I need to ask you about the old mill." The man's expression remained calm. I've already told you. I know nothing. You knew about falsified accounts. Silence. Ewan watched him carefully. You've been lying. Fraser sighed. Yes. Why? Because some truths do more harm than lies. That's a very convenient philosophy. It is sometimes necessary. What did Charles discover? Fraser looked toward the villagers. Not here. They walked into the empty vestry. Fraser closed the door. 20 years ago, money was stolen from the mill fund. How much? Enough to ruin several families. Who stole it? I never proved it. Who was suspected? Fraser looked directly at him. Douglas Kerr's father. Ewan said nothing. Charles discovered the old records, Fraser continued. He intended to expose everything. Why? Because he wanted leverage. Against whom? Everyone. Ewan understood. Weatherby had not been an innocent victim. He had found a secret and intended to use it. That created plenty of motives. But it did not explain one thing. The button, Ewan said. Fraser looked puzzled. A brass button with a stag engraved on it. The minister's face changed. Where did you find that? In the church. Fraser swallowed. That button belonged to Charles. Ewan frowned. His coat had brass buttons. Yes. I checked. His coat is missing one. The minister stepped backward. Then the killer took it. Why? I don't know. Ewan studied him. Yes, you do. Fraser looked away. The stag was the emblem of the old estate. Weatherby's estate? No. Whose? The minister hesitated. Douglas Kerr's family. Ewan felt a coldness that had nothing to do with the weather. The dead man's missing button had been found in the church. The minister had been there. Kerr had threatened Weatherby. And someone had tried to frighten Ewan away. Yet the simplest explanation still seemed wrong. Because the killer had left many clues. Ewan had seen deliberate mistakes before. They were mistakes. Outside, the church bell rang once. On the floor lay an envelope bearing his name. Inside were 6 words. Ask the mayor about the woman at the mill. Chapter 6. The Secret in the Stone House. Ewan McCrae disliked anonymous messages. They were usually written by people who had watched too many detective programs and imagined that policemen enjoyed riddles. He stood outside the church, with the latest note in his hand. Ask the mayor about the woman at the mill. He read it again. Then he put it in his pocket. The sensible thing would have been to tell Sergeant McBride. Ewan considered this. The sensible thing was often overrated. He walked toward the old mill. It stood beyond the village, where the river narrowed between 2 steep banks. Once it had produced flour for half the district. Now its stone walls were black with age, its windows broken, and ivy climbed across the roof. A small cottage stood beside it. The woman who lived there was called Agnes Muir. Ewan had known Agnes since childhood. She was 76, widowed, sharp-eyed, and possessed of the remarkable ability to know who had arrived in the village before they had reached the post office. She opened the door before Ewan knocked. You're late. For what? Your tea. I didn't know I was invited. Your police. You're always invited when there's trouble. She disappeared inside. Ewan followed. The cottage was warm and smelled of peat smoke. Agnes placed a cup in front of him. Milk. Aye. Sugar? 1. She gave him 2. I know you. Ewan stirred his tea. Who was the woman at the mill? Agnes sat opposite him. For several seconds she said nothing. Then she smiled. Which one? Ewan stopped stirring. There was more than one? There are always more than one. Agnes, the woman Charles was looking for, was called Fiona MacLeod. Who is she? She used to work at the mill. When? 20 years ago. Where is she now? Dead. Ewan frowned. How? Drowned. When? 20 years ago. The room seemed suddenly quieter. Accident? That is what they said. Who was she? Agnes looked toward the window. Accountant. Ewan leaned forward. Was she involved with the missing money? She knew where it went. Did she steal it? No. Then who did? Agnes looked at him. You're asking the wrong question. What is the right one? Who needed her to disappear? Ewan stared at the old woman. You knew her? Yes. Were you friends? No. Enemies? No. What were you? Neighbors. That answer sounded rehearsed. Ewan waited. Agnes sighed. Fiona found something in the mill records. What? Payments. To whom? People who shouldn't have received them. Names. I never saw the list. But you knew about it. I knew she was frightened. Before she died. Yes. Did she tell you who frightened her? Agnes shook her head. She only said one thing. What? If anything happens to me, look under the saint's stone. Ewan blinked. The Saint's Stone. Agnes nodded. Where is it? At the old chapel. Ewan knew the place. A ruined chapel stood half a mile beyond the mill. What did Fiona mean? I don't know. You never looked. Agnes gave him an offended look. Of course I looked. And nothing. Ewan finished his tea. What did Charles know? Agnes stared at him. He came here yesterday. Why? To ask about Fiona. What did you tell him? The truth. Which was? That Fiona didn't drown. Ewan put his cup down. Agnes continued. She was murdered. Who told you? Fiona. Before she died. Yes. Ewan felt a chill. Where did you see her? Here. When? The night before she disappeared. What did she say? That she had found proof. Proof of what? That someone in Glenmara had been stealing from the mill for years. Did she name the person? Agnes shook her head. She said naming him would get her killed. Did she leave anything with you? No. Ewan watched her. You're lying. Agnes smiled. Good policeman. She reached beneath her chair and produced a small wooden box. Inside was a brass key. Ewan picked it up. What does this open? The old mill. Which door? The basement. Ewan stared at the key. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because you never asked. That seems unfair. Life is unfair. Ewan slipped the key into his pocket. Who else knows about this? Charles. Anyone else? Fiona's daughter. Ewan looked up. She had a daughter. Yes. What was her name? Agnes hesitated. Moira. Where is she? Glenmara. Ewan's mind raced. He knew nearly everyone in the village, but he couldn't remember a Moira MacLeod. What does she look like? Agnes smiled faintly. You've seen her. When? Today. Ewan stared at her. Where? At the Fête. He remembered her. A quiet woman in a blue coat. She had stood beside the church gate for most of the afternoon. He had barely noticed her. That bothered him. Ewan left the cottage and walked toward the mill. The sky was darkening. He crossed the wet grass and reached the basement door. The brass key turned easily. Inside, the air smelled of damp stone. His torch revealed old machinery, broken crates, and shelves covered with dust. At the far end stood a wooden cabinet. Ewan opened it. Inside were ledgers. Dozens of them. Most were rotting. One was newer. He opened it. Names, dates, payments, and beside several payments was the same initial, K. Ewan heard something behind him. He turned. The doorway was empty. Then the door slammed shut. Ewan rushed toward it. Locked. He tried the handle. Nothing. Smoke began creeping beneath the door. Someone had set fire to the old mill. Ewan kicked the door once, twice. The wood cracked. He heard footsteps outside. Then a voice spoke through the flames. You should have left this alone. Ewan recognized it. And for the first time since Charles Weatherby's death, he was genuinely afraid. The voice belonged to the mayor, but Ewan knew one thing. Frightened men lied, while desperate men sometimes told the truth. Chapter 7. The Woman Who Did Not Run. Ewan did not waste time wondering why the mayor had come to burn him alive. He kicked the basement door again. The old wood groaned but held. Smoke thickened around his boots. Open it, he shouted. There was no answer. He kicked again, harder. The lock splintered. The door flew inward, and Ewan stumbled into the corridor, coughing. Flames were already climbing the wooden stairs toward the main floor. Somewhere above him, beams began to crack. He ran. Outside, Douglas Kerr was gone. Ewan stood in the rain, breathing hard. The old mill burned behind him. He should have been furious. Instead, he was thinking. Kerr had known exactly where he was. He had known about the basement. He had known Ewan would find the ledgers, and he had been waiting outside. That made Kerr look guilty, almost too guilty. Ewan walked back toward the village. By the time he reached the church hall, Sergeant McBride was waiting. Where have you been? Having a quiet evening. You smell like smoke. I was near a fire. McBride stared at him. What fire? The mill. McBride swore. Who started it? Ewan looked toward the mayor. Kerr was nowhere in sight. I don't know. McBride grabbed his arm. You were inside. You could have been killed. I noticed. What happened? Someone locked me in. Who? Ewan hesitated. Then he said, the mayor. McBride's expression hardened. Are you certain? I heard his voice. Then why isn't he under arrest? Because I'm not certain he was the person who lit the fire. McBride stared at him. That makes no sense. It does to me. Ewan looked around the hall. Everyone was watching them. Margaret Weatherby, Ella Morrison, Reverend Fraser, Agnes Muir, and among them stood a woman in a blue coat, Moira MacLeod. She was staring at Ewan. Not with surprise, with recognition. Ewan walked toward her. You knew Charles? Yes. You knew about the mill? Yes. You knew your mother? Her face tightened. Yes. Why didn't you tell me? Because you never asked. Ewan sighed. Everybody in this village has the same answer. Moira almost smiled. Then her expression changed. Did you find the ledger? Ewan stopped. That question told him everything. You knew there was a ledger. My mother told me. Before she died. Yes. Why didn't you tell Charles? I did. When? Yesterday. Ewan frowned. Where? At the hotel. Were you with him when he received the warning? No. Did you threaten him? No. Did you kill him? No. She answered quickly. Too quickly. Ewan watched her face. Your mother was murdered. Yes. And you believe Charles discovered who killed her? Yes. Who? Moira looked toward the door. Douglas Kerr. There it was again. The same name. Ewan lowered his voice. Why would Kerr kill your mother 20 years ago? Because she found the accounts. And Charles? He found proof. Where? Moira looked at him. You have it. Ewan remembered the ledger. The one marked with K. Someone burned the mill. Yes. Someone wanted the ledger destroyed. Yes. Did you? No. Did Kerr? I don't know. Ewan studied her. Then why do you look relieved? She swallowed. Because if the ledger survived, everything will come out. Ewan reached inside his coat. The ledger was still there. He had taken it before the fire reached the shelves. He had not told McBride. He had not told anyone. Moira saw it. Her eyes widened. You have it. Then you must hide it. Why? Because Kerr isn't the only person who wants it. Ewan felt the room become strangely quiet. Who else? Moira shook her head. I don't know. That isn't good enough, I swear. Ewan believed her. Not because she sounded honest. Because she looked terrified. Behind them, someone dropped a cup. Ewan turned. Reverend Fraser stood beside the tea table. The cup lay broken at his feet. He was staring at the ledger beneath Ewan's coat. Ewan understood. The minister knew. Perhaps he had always known. He crossed the room. Reverend. Fraser looked pale. You found it. I hoped it had been destroyed. Why? Because the names inside will ruin people. People who deserve it? Fraser closed his eyes. Some do. Some? There are innocent names too. Ewan frowned. Explain. The payments were not all theft. What were they? Protection. From whom? Fraser looked toward the windows. From the man who controlled the mill. Who? Fraser said nothing. Ewan waited. Finally the minister whispered, Charles Weatherby. Ewan stared at him. That can't be. Charles's father owned the company. And? He was the one who stole the money. Ewan felt the mystery shift beneath his feet. Everyone had been pointing at Kerr. Everyone had wanted Ewan to suspect Kerr. Perhaps that was exactly what the killer wanted. Then why did Charles investigate it? Because he wanted to blackmail the people involved. His own family? He didn't care. Ewan looked at Moira. She had heard every word. Her face had gone white. My mother knew? Fraser nodded. She discovered the truth. And Charles knew? Yes. Then why did he help me? Fraser looked at her sadly. He didn't. The church hall fell silent. Ewan understood the trap. Charles had not been investigating an old murder to expose corruption. He had been collecting secrets. He had been using the dead past to control the living. And somebody had finally decided that Charles knew too much. But one question remained. Who had killed him? Ewan looked at the faces around the hall. Then he noticed something. Moira's blue coat had a missing brass button. A tiny stag was engraved on the remaining one. The same stag as the button found in the church. Ewan said nothing. He simply watched her. And Moira realized, too late, that he had noticed. For the time, Ewan stopped pretending to be slow. He slipped the ledger deeper into his coat and smiled. Moira understood the danger, but she did not run. That frightened him more than anything else. Chapter 8. A button, a lie, and a very bad alibi. Ewan followed Moira outside. She stopped beneath the church porch and turned to face him. You saw it, she said. The button. Yes. I saw that you were missing one. She looked down at her coat. It happened at the Fête. When? Before the rain. Where? Near the marquee. Convenient. Her expression hardened. You think I killed Charles. I think you know more than you have told me. That isn't the same thing. No. Ewan leaned against the stone wall. Did you meet Charles behind the marquee? Yes. What did you discuss? My mother. What about her? He admitted he knew she had been murdered. Did he say who killed her? No. Did you argue? Yes. Did you threaten him? Moira looked directly at him. I told him he deserved whatever happened. That sounds remarkably close to a threat. It was. Ewan nodded. Thank you. For what? For being honest. She stared at him. You don't believe me. I believe you wanted him frightened. Did you? Yes. Why? Because he destroyed people's lives. Ewan studied her. You said he helped you. I was wrong. That happens. She turned toward the road. I didn't kill him. Then tell me where you were when he died. At the church. With whom? No one. That is unfortunate. Why? Because people with no witnesses tend to become suspects. She looked irritated. You think you're clever. Occasionally. Ewan walked back into the hall. Sergeant McBride intercepted him. Where have you been? Talking. To whom? Moira MacLeod. McBride's eyes narrowed. The woman whose mother supposedly died 20 years ago. Supposedly. I've learned never to trust a story that survives 20 years unchanged. McBride lowered his voice. You've got something. Ewan looked at him. Why? You have that expression. What expression? The one you get when you've found something and don't intend to tell me. Then perhaps you should stop looking at my face. McBride sighed. Tell me. Later. Ewan. Later. He walked away. Outside, the fire brigade had finished dealing with the mill. The building was blackened but still standing. Douglas Kerr had returned. He was speaking with 2 officers. Ewan approached. You tried to kill me. Kerr's face went white. No. You locked the basement door. I didn't. I heard you. You heard someone who sounded like me. Ewan stared. Kerr looked frightened. Then he whispered. You don't understand. Explain. I went to the mill because I knew you were there. How? Someone told me. Who? Kerr hesitated. A woman. Which woman? I never saw her face. Ewan glanced toward the village. Where did she meet you? By the river. When? Before the fire. What did she say? She said the ledger had to disappear. Did she give you anything? Kerr shook his head. Did she know about Charles? Yes. How? She said she had killed him. Ewan went still. Those exact words. Yes. Who was she? I don't know. Kerr looked toward the church. She wore a blue coat. Ewan felt the cold return. Did she have a missing button? I didn't notice. Ewan turned away. Too convenient. Someone wanted him to suspect Moira. Perhaps Kerr was lying. Perhaps the woman had really confessed. Or perhaps someone had deliberately used a blue coat because they knew Ewan had seen Moira wearing one. He returned to the hotel. Margaret Weatherby was waiting in the lobby. You need to leave, Ewan told her. She looked surprised. Why? Because your brother's death is more complicated than anyone thought. She sat down. What have you found? Your brother was investigating his own family. Margaret went pale. Charles. His father was involved in the old mill accounts. She looked toward the staircase. I knew. Ewan frowned. You knew. Not everything. What did you know? That my father ruined people. Did Charles know? Yes. Did he use that knowledge? Margaret closed her eyes. He blackmailed people. Who? Anyone he could. Ewan thought of the village. Was Douglas Kerr one of them? Yes. Reverend Fraser? Yes. Ella Morrison? Margaret nodded. Moira? No. Why not? Charles felt sorry for her. That surprised him. Charles Weatherby felt sorry for someone? Sometimes. What happened between Charles and Moira? Margaret hesitated. She asked him to help prove her mother's murder. And did he? He promised. But he lied. Ewan understood. Charles had promised justice, while secretly using the old records for his own purposes. Margaret stood. There is something else. What? Charles received a second letter. Ewan waited. It arrived yesterday morning. Where is it? Gone. Did you read it? Yes. What did it say? Margaret's voice trembled. Your father wasn't the thief. Ewan stared at her. Whose father? Charles's. What else? He wasn't responsible for Fiona's death either. Ewan's mind raced. The mystery had been built around the wrong man. Charles's father had not stolen the money. Someone else had. Someone close enough to manipulate the records. Someone who had remained in Glenmara for 20 years. Ewan walked to the window. Across the road, Reverend Fraser stood beneath an umbrella. Beside him was Ella Morrison. They were arguing. Then Ella handed him something. A small envelope. Ewan left the hotel. By the time he reached the churchyard, both had disappeared. But the envelope lay beneath the stone bench. Ewan picked it up. His name was written on the front. Inside was one sentence. The killer is not the person you think she is. Ewan read it twice. Then he heard footsteps behind him. He turned. Moira stood at the church gate. Her face was pale. You shouldn't have opened that, she said. Why? Because now they know you have it. Who? Moira looked toward the dark road. The person who killed Charles. A car appeared through the mist. It slowed beside the gate. Moira grabbed Ewan's arm. Don't move. The car stopped. No one spoke. Then something flashed inside the vehicle. Ewan pushed Moira aside as the shot cracked through the night. Chapter 9. The Trap Beneath the Rain. The shot struck the stone bench. Fragments of granite flew across the churchyard. Ewan dragged Moira behind a low wall. Stay down. I am down. Lower. There isn't much lower. Another shot cracked through the darkness. Then the car accelerated. Its tires splashed through the flooded road and vanished into the mist. Ewan remained still until the sound disappeared. Moira was breathing hard. You were right, she whispered. About what? They know. Ewan looked at the damaged bench. Apparently. He stood. Moira caught his sleeve. Don't. Why? There could be another shot. There could also be tea somewhere. She stared at him. You're impossible. So I've been told. He examined the road. No footprints. No shell casing. Whoever had fired had planned carefully. Ewan returned to the bench. The envelope was still in his pocket. He opened it again. The killer is not the person you think she is. The word she bothered him. Someone wanted him looking at a woman. Moira, Margaret, Ella, perhaps all three. He looked at Moira. Did you write this? No. Did you know who did? No. Then why were you waiting for me? I wasn't. You were at the gate. Yes. Why? She hesitated. Because I wanted to warn you. About the shooter, about the ledger. Ewan stiffened. What about it? It isn't complete. What do you mean? Some pages were removed before the fire. By whom? I don't know. You always say that. Because it's true. Ewan studied her. Then he noticed something on the ground. A small piece of blue wool, caught on the stone wall. He picked it up. Moira's coat was blue, but the wool was darker. Navy. Where did you get this? I don't know. Ewan placed it in his pocket. Come with me. Where? To the station. Am I under arrest? Not yet. That isn't reassuring. It wasn't intended to be. At the station, Sergeant McBride was furious. You were shot at. Aye. And you didn't call me. I've just arrived. Who fired? Someone in a car. Number plate? No. McBride swore. What were you doing? Reading a letter. What letter? Ewan handed it over. McBride read the sentence. His face changed. This could be important. Everything is important tonight. McBride looked at him. You're hiding something. Yes. What? The ledger. McBride stared. You have it. Aye. Where? Ewan took it from his coat. McBride opened the cover. Several pages had been scorched, but the writing remained visible. Names. Payments. Dates. And one final entry. Fiona MacLeod, payment refused. Below it was another line. Witness, Ella Morrison. McBride looked up. Ella. Aye. Bring her in. Ewan shook his head. Not yet. Why? Because she may be the only person who knows the truth. Or the killer. Exactly. Ewan closed the ledger. We need to make someone believe we've found the missing pages. McBride frowned. You want to plant a story. A false one. That is highly questionable police work. It is also effective. McBride considered him. What story? Ewan smiled. We tell the village the missing pages contain the name of Fiona MacLeod's murderer. And where will you say they are? In the church. McBride understood. You want the killer to come for them. Aye. That could get someone hurt. It already has. McBride sighed. You're enjoying this. No. Ewan paused. Not much. They waited until midnight. Then McBride announced publicly that the evidence would remain inside the church until morning. The village reacted exactly as Ewan expected. Doors opened. Lights appeared. People whispered. And someone left the hotel. Ewan watched from the police station window. A figure in a dark coat crossed the road. Then another. A third emerged from the alley. 3 people. 3 possible suspects. Ewan followed at a distance. The first figure entered the church. The second stopped beside the gate. The third disappeared behind the vestry. Ewan waited. Then he smiled. The trap was working. He entered through the side door. The church was dark. A candle burned near the altar. Beside it lay a folder containing several blank pages. A floorboard creaked. Ewan turned. Ella Morrison stood in the aisle. She looked terrified. You shouldn't have come, he whispered. I had to. Why? Because the real pages are here. Where? She pointed toward the altar. Ewan walked closer. Before he could reach it, the The church doors slammed shut. Ella gasped. Someone laughed softly in the darkness. Then Reverend Fraser stepped from behind a pillar. Ewan stared. The minister held a revolver. "I'm sorry," Fraser said. Ewan sighed. "Of course." Fraser raised the weapon. "You have no idea what you've uncovered." "Actually, I do." "No." Fraser's hand trembled. "You have found the records, but not the truth." "Then tell me." The minister looked at Ella. "She knows." Ella began crying. Ewan watched her carefully. "Ella." She nodded. "Tell him." Her voice broke. "I killed Fiona." Silence filled the church. Ewan did not move. Fraser closed his eyes. Ella continued. "I didn't mean to." "Then why did you kill Charles?" She stared at him. "I didn't." Ewan smiled. "That is what I thought." Fraser lowered the gun slightly. "You're lying." "No," Ewan said. "She is." Everyone turned. A figure stepped from the shadows. Moira. She held the missing ledger pages. And she was smiling. "I killed Charles," she said. Ewan felt the entire puzzle click into place. But one question remained. Why had she confessed so calmly? He knew the answer. Because she was not confessing. She was setting the final trap. And Ewan suddenly understood why the message had warned him about a woman. The killer had wanted him chasing shadows, while the real evidence moved between hands. Moira raised the pages. "You wanted me to follow you," Ewan said. "Yes." "Why?" "Because I needed police to hear the truth." Outside, footsteps approached. McBride shouted through the doors. "Ewan!" Moira looked toward the entrance. "Now," she whispered. The piece was about to fall into place. Chapter 10. The Truth Beneath the Old Mill. Moira stood beneath the church window, holding the missing ledger pages in both hands. Reverend Fraser looked at her as though he had seen a ghost. Ella Morrison was crying. Ewan McCrae remained perfectly still. "Put the gun down," he said to Fraser. The minister stared at him. "I cannot." "You can." "I have gone too far." "That happens." Fraser laughed bitterly. "You think this is amusing?" "No. I think you're frightened." The minister's hand trembled. Moira stepped forward. "Give me the gun, Reverend." "No. You know this has to end." Fraser looked at her. "Your mother should never have died." Moira's expression hardened. "But she did. And Charles. He deserved to answer for what he knew." Ewan watched them. Something was wrong. Moira was speaking like someone who had rehearsed the conversation. That meant she had expected this moment. He looked at Ella. "You said you killed Fiona." Ella wiped her eyes. "I lied." "Why?" "Because Charles made me." "Explain." Ella took a breath. "Fiona discovered the accounts. She gave me copies because she trusted me. Charles found out and threatened to expose me unless I helped him locate the original documents." "Why would he need you?" "Because I knew where Fiona had hidden them." "Where?" "The church." Ewan glanced toward Fraser. The minister closed his eyes. "I found them," he whispered. "And you kept them?" Ewan asked. "For 20 years. Why?" "Because I believed exposing the truth would destroy families who had already suffered enough." Ewan shook his head. "That wasn't your decision to make." "No." Fraser looked toward Moira. "I know that now." Moira placed the papers on the altar. "These are the missing pages." Ewan approached. He read them carefully. The payments were not from the mill. They were from a private account belonging to Charles Weatherby's father. Money had been sent to several villagers after Fiona's death. One name appeared repeatedly. Douglas Kerr. Another appeared beneath it. Reverend Colin Fraser. But the final payment was different. It had been made to Charles Weatherby himself. Ewan looked up. "Charles was paying you." Fraser nodded. "He paid me to keep quiet." "About Fiona?" "Yes." "And the mill?" "Yes." Ewan understood. Charles had spent years pretending to investigate his family's crimes while secretly profiting from them. The old mystery was not a simple theft. It was blackmail passed from one generation to another. "Who killed Fiona?" Ewan asked. Fraser looked at Ella. She whispered. "Douglas Kerr's father." Ewan's eyes narrowed. "Then why did you confess?" Ella looked at Moira. "Because she asked me to." Ewan turned. "Moira." Moira nodded. "I needed to know who would panic when the truth appeared." "You used me." "Yes." "I dislike being used." "I know." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't know whom to trust." Ewan looked at the minister. "And now?" "Now I trust you." "That seems unwise." For the first time, Moira smiled. The church doors suddenly opened. Sergeant McBride entered with 2 officers. Douglas Kerr was with them. His face was pale. "You're under arrest," McBride said. Kerr looked toward Moira. "You promised me." Moira said nothing. Ewan stared at him. "You started the fire." Kerr shook his head. "I didn't kill Weatherby." "No," Ewan said. "But you tried to destroy the ledger." I had to. Why? Because my father killed Fiona. The words hung in the church. Kerr's shoulders collapsed. He confessed before he died. He told me everything. I spent 20 years protecting his name. You threatened Charles. Yes. You went to the mill. Yes. You locked the door. No. Ewan looked at him. Then who did? Kerr hesitated. The minister. Everyone turned toward Fraser. The minister said nothing. Ewan's eyes narrowed. You locked me inside. Fraser nodded. I did. Why? To frighten you. You nearly killed me. I thought the fire would burn slowly. Ewan stared at him. You are a terrible judge of fireplaces. Fraser looked exhausted. I wanted the ledger destroyed. And Charles. I didn't kill him. Who did? Silence. Moira stepped forward. I did. McBride moved toward her. Ewan stopped him. Let her finish. Moira looked at the floor. I followed Charles after the fete. Why? He had the final proof about my mother. What happened? I confronted him. And he laughed. Her voice cracked. He told me my mother had been forgotten. He said nobody cared anymore. Then he threatened to destroy the evidence. What did you do? I struck him. With what? A brass candlestick. Ewan remembered the absence of a wound. The strange position of the body. The surprise on Weatherby's face. What happened afterward? I panicked. You moved him? Yes. To the wall? Yes. Why? To make it look as though he had fallen. Ewan nodded. That explains the footprints. Moira looked at him. I walked backward afterward because I was frightened. And your shoes? I changed them. Where? At the mill. Ewan finally understood the missing footprints. Moira had crossed the wall, changed shoes, and returned through the river path. But she had not planned the letter. She had not fired the shot. She had not burned the mill. Someone else had been protecting the same secret. Ewan turned toward Fraser. You threatened me because you wanted the ledger destroyed. Yes. And the shooter? Fraser looked at Douglas Kerr. Kerr whispered. Not me. Ewan smiled. Then we have another mystery. McBride groaned. No. Ewan looked through the church window. A black sedan was parked across the road. Its engine was running. He recognized it. The same car from earlier. McBride. They rushed outside. The sedan accelerated. McBride shouted for the officers to follow. Ewan remained behind. He looked at the others. I'm going home. McBride stared at him. What? I've had enough. You can't leave. Watch me. For once, nobody argued. Ewan walked through the rain toward his cottage. Behind him, Glenmara was full of shouting policemen, frightened villagers, old secrets, and one remaining mystery. He was smiling because the killer might not yet be caught. But Ewan knew exactly where to look. And, more importantly, he knew that tomorrow morning there would be coffee. For the moment, that was enough. Chapter 11. The Last Guest. Ewan woke before sunrise, because someone was knocking at his door. 3 slow knocks came first, then a 4th. He considered ignoring them. The 5th convinced him that whoever stood outside possessed the persistence of a tax collector. Ewan opened the door. Sergeant McBride stood on the step. You've been asleep. I was. Good. I need you. That sounds serious. It is. Ewan looked beyond him. Did you catch the car? No. Then why are you here? We found the driver. Ewan's expression changed. Who? McBride stepped aside. Margaret Weatherby stood beside the police car, pale and exhausted. I drove it, she said. Ewan stared at her. You shot at us. No. Then why did you flee? Because I was afraid. Of whom? The person who killed Charles. Charles is dead. I know. Then what frightened you? Margaret looked toward the hills. Something worse than the police. 20 minutes later, Ewan sat at the station with a mug of coffee that tasted like boiled rope. Margaret sat opposite him. Tell me everything. She folded her hands. Charles called me yesterday morning. He told me to come to Glenmara immediately. Why? He said someone had discovered what he had been doing. Blackmailing people? Yes. Who? Douglas Kerr. Reverend Fraser. Ella Morrison. Others. Why did you help him? I didn't. You drove him to the fete, he asked me. What happened afterward? He told me he'd received another warning. The letter? Yes. Who did he suspect? Myself. Why? Because I knew about the old accounts. Ewan watched her carefully. Did you kill Fiona MacLeod? No. Who did? My father. Margaret lowered her eyes. He was obsessed with the mill. When Fiona discovered the payments, he confronted her beside the river. They argued. She fell. An accident? Yes. Why hide it? He was afraid of prison. And you protected him. I was 17. Ewan's expression softened. That was 20 years ago. I have lived with it every day. Did Charles know? Yes. And he used it against you? Yes. Did he kill Fiona? No. Then why did he die? Margaret looked at him. He found the final account. What account? The account proving who had been paying the witnesses. Ewan remembered the ledger. Who was paying them? My brother. That surprised him. Charles? Yes. Why? To make certain nobody ever told the truth. Ewan looked toward McBride. The sergeant had been listening from the window. There's more, Margaret said. Go on. Charles kept the final account in his car. Which car? The black sedan. Ewan and McBride exchanged a glance. They searched the vehicle. Inside the glove compartment, they found a leather folder. It contained a list of payments. At the bottom was a recent entry. Maria MacLeod. Ewan stared. Charles paid her. Margaret shook her head. No. Beside Moira's name was one word. Protected. Ewan understood. Charles had been protecting Moira. But why? He returned to the church. Moira was sitting beneath the stained glass window. You came back, she said. I thought the case was finished. So did I. He placed the document before her. Your name. She looked at it. Protected. Why? Charles promised to protect me. From what? The truth. Ewan waited. Moira finally spoke. My mother wasn't killed because she discovered stolen money. Then what did she discover? A secret fund. Whose? Everyone's. Ewan frowned. The mill workers were paid to keep quiet about dangerous machinery. The owners knew. The council knew. My mother found out and threatened to expose them. And Charles? He confronted her. Why? He wanted the papers. What happened? They argued. She fell. Charles caused her death. Yes. But he didn't intend to kill her. No. Ewan looked at Moira. That is why you killed him. She nodded. I wanted him to admit what he'd done. And when he refused, I struck him. With the candlestick. Yes. Then you moved the body. Yes. The backward footprints. Yes. And the missing button. It caught on the wall. Ewan nodded. You should have told me. I was afraid. That is understandable. What about the shooter? Moira looked toward the door. Not me. Who? Charles's lawyer. Ewan frowned. Why would his lawyer shoot at us? To destroy the account. McBride entered. We found him. Where? At the station. Ewan blinked. He came voluntarily. Why? He says he has something to confess. Ewan looked at Moira. Then at Margaret. The mystery was finally becoming simple. Not clean. Not pleasant. But simple. He picked up his coat. Let's go. Outside, the rain had stopped. Sunlight touched the mountains. Ewan stood quietly for a moment. Glenmara would survive. The village would gossip. The council would argue. Lawyers would descend. And Ewan would probably be blamed for the entire affair. He smiled. He could live with that. As long as nobody mentioned promotion. He turned toward the station. Then stopped. One thing first. McBride looked at him. What? Coffee. You've already had coffee. That wasn't coffee. McBride sighed. You're impossible. Ewan smiled. That's what keeps me employed. At the station, the lawyer was waiting beside the desk, his coat folded over one arm. His name was Alistair Grant. He looked tired. I fired the shot, he said. Why? Charles kept copies of everything. He planned to sell the information. To whom? Developers. Ewan frowned. Even after he was dead. The account survived him. Who hired you? No one. That answer surprised Ewan. Grant continued. I was afraid Charles would expose me. I helped him hide the old payments. When I learnt the ledger had survived the fire, I panicked. You tried to kill Moira. No. I meant to frighten her. You nearly killed me. I know. Ewan looked at McBride. That's enough. McBride nodded. As Grant was led away, Ewan glanced through the station window. The village was waking. Bakers opened doors. Fishermen crossed the road. Mrs. Bell was arguing with someone. Normality had returned. Ewan breathed. For once, he did not mind the noise. Chapter 12. The Fête is forgotten. By noon, Glenmara had returned to its usual condition. Damp, argumentative, and convinced that nothing important had happened. This was remarkable, considering that within the previous 24 hours there had been a murder, an attempted shooting, an arson attack, 3 arrests, 1 confession, and enough secrets to keep the village gossiping until Christmas. Ewan McCrae sat in the police station with his boots on the desk. Sergeant McBride stood over him. You could at least look busy. I am. You're drinking tea. Exactly. McBride folded his arms. Headquarters wants a report. Give them one. They want yours. Ewan sighed. Paperwork was the natural enemy of happiness. He picked up the pen. Charles Weatherby was killed by Moira MacLeod after a confrontation concerning the death of her mother. McBride nodded. Continue. Reverend Fraser attempted to destroy evidence connected with the old mill accounts. Continue. Douglas Kerr concealed his father's involvement in Fiona MacLeod's death. Continue. Alistair Grant fired shots at the church in an attempt to frighten those who had discovered the surviving account. McBride nodded again. And the missing pages. Recovered. The button? Evidence. The anonymous letters? Evidence. And the case? Finished. McBride smiled. Excellent. Ewan put down the pen. Now leave. I haven't finished. What? Headquarters is considering recommending you for commendation. Ewan stared at him. No. McBride laughed. They may. Tell them I refuse. You cannot refuse a commendation. Watch me. McBride shook his head. You're a strange man. I've heard that. He left. Ewan returned to his report. Outside, church bells rang 12 times. He glanced through the window. The village green was empty. The torn bunting from the Fête still hung from several poles. A soggy poster advertised homemade jam. One surviving sign read, Family Fun Afternoon. Ewan smiled. Family fun had been an ambitious description. The door opened. Mrs. Bell entered carrying a basket. You haven't eaten. I had toast. When? Yesterday. She put the basket on his desk. Inside were sandwiches, fruit cake, and 2 enormous scones. Ewan looked at them with gratitude. Is there jam? Of course. You're a good woman. I know. She sat opposite him. Tell me something. What? Who really killed Weatherby? Ewan reached for a scone. Moira. And the shooting? His lawyer. And the fire. Fraser. And Kerr. Complicated. Mrs. Bell nodded knowingly. Men. Ewan smiled. Usually. She poured tea. What happened to the old mill? The council is taking control of it. Will they? They say they will. That means they won't. Probably. She looked satisfied. And Moira, she'll face trial. Will she go to prison? I don't know. Mrs. Bell frowned. You know everything. Not everything. Most things. Ewan shook his head. The truth isn't always as tidy as people want. She considered this. That's because people aren't tidy. Exactly. After she left, Ewan finished the last scone. Then he walked home. The rain had finally stopped. Mist floated above the river. The mountains appeared beyond it, dark and enormous, their tops hidden behind clouds. Ewan paused on the road. Glenmara looked peaceful. He knew better. Peace was never permanent. But perhaps that was why it mattered. At his cottage, the kettle was waiting. He made coffee and opened the kitchen window. A cold breeze entered. Somewhere beyond the hill, a dog barked. Ewan sat beside the stove. For the first time since the Fête, he allowed himself to think about Charles Weatherby. The man had arrived believing money could buy obedience. He had treated the village as something to purchase, reshape, and eventually leave. Instead, Glenmara had swallowed him whole. Ewan wondered whether Charles had understood, at the end, that the people he considered insignificant had known more about him than he knew about them. Probably not. Arrogant men rarely understood the people beneath them. There was a knock at the door. Ewan groaned. He opened it. McBride stood outside. Don't tell me there's another murder. No. Good. Headquarters called. Ewan's expression darkened. They're sending someone. Who? An inspector. Why? To review your work. Why? They're impressed. Ewan closed his eyes. That is the worst news I've heard all week. McBride laughed. They may offer you a promotion. I won't take it. You might have to. I'll resign. You'd never leave Glenmara. Exactly. McBride shook his head. You're impossible. Ewan smiled. Tea? No. Coffee? No. Then why are you here? To warn you about the inspector? When? Tomorrow. Ewan looked toward the hills. He had one evening left. One quiet evening. He could already imagine the questions, the paperwork, the praise, and the inevitable suggestion that he transfer somewhere larger. He hated larger places. They had traffic and strangers, and far too many policemen. Ewan picked up his coffee. I've got a plan. McBride raised an eyebrow. What's that? I'm going fishing. There's no season. I know. That's illegal. Ewan smiled. Then perhaps headquarters will think I'm hopeless again. McBride laughed all the way down the road. Ewan closed the door. The cottage became quiet. He returned to his chair, lifted his coffee, and listened to the wind moving across the hills. The village fate was forgotten. The murder was solved. The old secrets had finally surfaced. And Glenmara, battered but stubborn, was itself again. Outside, the last clouds drifted over the mountains, revealing a pale strip of evening sky. The river carried the rainwater quietly toward the sea, while smoke curled from chimneys across the village. Somewhere, Mrs. Bell was undoubtedly telling someone that Ewan had solved the whole affair by accident. He did not mind. Let people believe that. It was safer that way, and considerably less tiring for everyone after all. Ewan smiled. Tomorrow could take care of itself. Tonight, there was coffee. There was stew warming on the stove, and there was nowhere else in the world he would rather be. For a policeman who had spent 2 days pretending not to notice everything, that was a very satisfactory ending indeed.